key important aspect is that having looked at what we call population data, we very well looked at the different sources of the population data, meaning places or the different sources where we can be able to get population information, referring to characteristics but also dynamics of individuals in the population. And therefore, today we want to look at the aspect of vital registration. And accordingly, in terms of the definition of vital registration is the official recording of vital events within a population, but primarily births and deaths. It's essentially a system for documenting these key moments in people's lives, creating a permanent record and providing valuable data for various purposes. So primarily, vital statistics mostly dwelt around the reporting of birth, but also reporting of death. In terms of the birth certificates and the death certificates. However, as we advance with information, there has been a regular collection of vital statistics. One, they include patient information, where there is clerking. There is also what we call migration information, where people in the official border posts, where individuals are crossing from one country to another. Those international borders, most times there is what they call registration, vital registration. And those are some of the key sources as to where we get information on vital statistics. And that is why it is very important for demographers to understand the aspect of vital registration, because it deals with two key events in demography, and that is birth and death. So what are some of the importances of understanding vital statistics, or what are some of the key reasons as to why there is need to do vital registration? One is that it provides reliable data on births and deaths, but also it helps track population growth, the age structure, and demographic trends, which then inform policy on healthcare, education, and resource allocation. So when you're able to collect the number of birth or the number of death that occur in a particular population, so then you can be able to track how the population is growing, but also you're able to track what are the age groups, or what your population comprises of in terms of the ages. Then some other demographic trends, which are where you're able to understand the female death rate, but also the male death rate, because then you're able to adjust and understand using what we studied earlier on regarding adjustment of age data and standardization of population data. You can be able to adjust and understand what are some of the mortality trends, but also what are some of the fertility trends in your population. And therefore, that is why it is important for you to understand reporting of birth. But at the smaller level, meaning at a health facility level, probably you're able to again understand how the deliveries are occurring in your health facility. But again, you can be able to understand the trend of maternal mortality, the trend of stillbirth, the trend of neonatal death that occur in your health facility, and therefore you can be able to understand some of the demographics. So if you realize that there are more female neonates who are dying in your health facility, it should be able to trigger you to understand why some of these issues might be occurring. But it could also trigger you to understand probably where the problem is coming from, and therefore you're able to address it. So as a demographer, you're not only working at a reproductive health aspect, but you're looking at a management level where you're able to analyze certain aspects of the population and make critical decisions. But also when we're talking about informing policy, therefore having data on birth and death can help you understand where the problems are, and you're able to make adequate policy, but also policies that are informed from data that you've collected. And therefore, similarly, it helps you in resource allocation where need be, you vis-a-vis where there is less need, and therefore you can be able to allocate resources appropriately. Secondly, vital registration helps us support disease surveillance, maternal and child health monitoring, and identifying risk factors for specific health issues. I am not well versed with the health system in South Sudan, but we had I was interacting with a few students in Uganda who have been studying a master's in public health, and he was telling me that in there most times the system still does manual collection of information data on health, whereby someone picks information from a village level on a hard copy and has to take to the next authority, until it reaches the ministry. However, in countries that are a little improved on their health system, there is what they call the health management information systems, which is a system that helps reporting of information. And that is why we're saying that doing vital registrations help us in doing disease surveillance. And therefore, in vital registration, you're able to take information on an individual, you're able to take record of their place of origin. For example, during the COVID period, we were able to do surveillance regarding the outbreak of COVID. So, for people who were coming or migrating from countries that had serious or large casualties of COVID or cases of COVID, then the country can be able to understand how you're able to deal with such patients or clients coming from countries that had high cases. And therefore, that is where, in an explanative way, surveillance comes in, but also in maternal and child health monitoring, because then through vital statistics, you're able to register the number of children an individual has, and the age, all these issues that you can be able to understand, because demographic characteristics are key in exposing individuals to certain health conditions. For example, a child who said they are maybe 13 years, 14 years in maternal and child health, and then if they conceived at that time, if you are able to understand through vital statistics that this particular client is probably of a teenage age, then you're able to offer them the expected support you're supposed to give them. And similarly, in identifying risk factors for specific health issues. And just as I had said, you can use age to try and relate certain disease factors, but risk factors, I mean. But as well, not only age, but key demographic characteristics. Then birth registration establishes legal identity, enabling access to education, healthcare, social security, benefits, and legal protection. So what happens is that in governments, birth registrations help to identify, for example, questions such as what is your birth or your place of birth, but also what is your nationality. So vital statistics or vital registration helps you to legally be identified with that particular country. For you to identify as a South Sudanese by birth, you should be having vital statistics with your birth details well registered, or on your explaining your place of birth. So then they can help you access education, for example, nationals, foreigners, refugees, like that. That is how they are categorized in terms of service delivery. And therefore, if you're registered legally, you can be able to access some of these services. But also, it informs development programs, resource allocation, and decision making across various sectors, which we have ably explained in our previous slide. So, what are the components of vital registration system? One is the legal framework, two is the registration offices, and three is civil registrars. Components, when we're talking about components, we're talking about the makeup. What is the makeup of vital registration systems? And when we're referring to systems, you understand these are collective uh, parts that affect a particular a particular action to occur. And therefore, when you're referring to legal framework as a component of vital registration, it is defined as a set of laws and regulations mandating reporting of vital events and establishing procedures for registration. So, a legal framework means that this is a nationwide, legally approved, legally meaning by the authorities that are meant to do so. For example, in certain countries, laws are formulated by members of parliament only, and therefore, when we're talking about legal frameworks, we would be referring to laws that are pass parliamentary approval. So, in this regard, a legal framework would clearly state who should be reported as in the system, when the reporting should be done, why the reporting should be done, but also what should be reported. And this can be legally drafted, meaning a draft of the national birth birth registration certificate. So if you go to online websites, you will be able to see countries that have their specific birth that have their specific birth. Can you see my screen?
The screen is visible. The slide was not moving, but it has now moved once up to that level where we are now.
Okay. So when you're talking about when I was explaining that if you go to online websites, you can be able to actually retrieve some of the birth certificates, and it is most times you as a demographer working in a particular setting that can develop some of these vital registration tools, and therefore when you're developing a birth certificate, you should be able to put the key demographic details in there that are legally prescribed by the law, meaning the name of the person, the name of the mother, the name of the father, the place of birth, the date of birth, the time of birth, or the country of birth, but also the health facility, or whether the person was born by a traditional birth attendant. All these details must be clearly reflected in your birth certificate. Secondly, is registration offices. These are designated locations where individuals can register births and deaths. Therefore, you cannot do registration of birth in every other place. Most times they are designated into national registration offices. They are designated into health facilities. They are designated into international recognized border posts. So this is most times where these places are legally designed. But also we have civil registrars. These are trained personnel responsible for receiving, recording, and processing vital event information. So when we're talking about the makeup of vital registration systems, we're talking about these three key makeups or components. So the fourth one is what we call data management and storage. These are secure systems for storing and managing vital registration data. So when this data is captured by civil registrars, it is supposed to be stored and managed by a system or a central system. And therefore, the management and storing of this data is very vital. When you do the registration of birth, it should be collected in a certain system, and therefore to avoid cases of repeated registration of individuals. And then fifthly, the other component is that there is statistical analysis and dissemination, processes for analyzing and reporting vital statistics to various stakeholders. So having done your vital statistics or having registered people using your vital registration systems, you should be at last able to statistically analyze and disseminate such an information. So as a health facility or as an in charge or as a CEO or as a leader, you should be able to conduct such vital registrations. Or if you're working in a humanitarian system, it is very important that you develop what they call a vital registration system for your organization so that you understand and know the categories of people that you're dealing with. Uh, we want to understand what are the challenges that come along with effective vital registration, because we know that whereas vital registration could actually be a very important aspect in trying to solve our population data challenges, it has some challenges. And that is why most countries in Africa, specifically sub-Saharan Africa, do not have very effective vital registration systems. One major challenge is limited access to registration services. You realize that these registration services are only offered in the urban settings, or they're offered in places that have probably religious institutions or schools or health facilities. And therefore, some of the population that does not, what we call hard to reach, some of the population that is away from such services most times do not access such services. But also there are weak infrastructures and resources. Less infrastructure has been allocated to vital registration by very many of the governments, and we understand resources such as human capital, meaning we do not have enough staff to run such particular exercises, but also we do not have the labor that is well equipped in terms of knowledge, and therefore it may be very hard. You may realize that in a country, whereas they may do vital statistics, but people who are doing vital statistics are people who have studied nursing. There are some who are doctors, and therefore they have not had a concept on doing vital registration, and at the end they do data capture in their own way and omit a lot of information. And that is why we have weak resources and infrastructure as well. But also we have challenges of cultural and social factors. And when we are broadly talking about cultural and social factors, we understand issues regarding education level as a social factor. We understand there are issues such as cultural norms and practices that probably do not allow some people to do registration. But also we know there are, apart from cultural norms and practices, there are some religious norms and practices that probably do not allow certain aspects regarding vital registration. But also we have individual biases, and therefore these are some of the key challenges that may arise as a result of vital registration. But also we know socially many people do not associate with taking their details. For example, ladies have, it is known that ladies have biases in mentioning their ages, and therefore these are some of the issues that may arise in terms of vital registration. But in what we refer to in Africa as the Western world, we also know that there are cultural issues arising from LGBTQ people who are who are saying that sexual orientations differ, and yet in our vital registrations in Africa, in many parts of Africa, whereas we have two categories of sexual orientation, a non-African, let me say, would have other orientations such as lesbian, gay, and so forth. So that is those are some of the broad cultural factors in there. But also we have issues of data quality and completeness. And just as I was saying, in weak infrastructure, whereas we do data collection using people who are less knowledgeable on how to collect data or to capture data, we most times have challenges of completeness. Someone might be able to write the place of birth, but does not know the time or the date of birth, and that is why we continuously have data quality issues regarding vital registrations. And even we know that sometimes, for example, if you went to your health facility and asked for information regarding the number of women who come to this health facility, say for any other service, either antenatal care or maternal services or child health services, or even outpatient services, you'll be surprised that they might capture the age of the person, they might capture the name of the person, but you may realize there are some demographic characteristics that may not be captured, such as someone's place of residence, probably someone's next of kin, someone's contact, or someone's date of birth might be varying with their age. Someone will tell you that they are born, or when you ask for their age, they will give you an age of 25, and then when you ask for their date of birth, they will give you a different date of birth that does not add up with the age that they have mentioned. So those are the data quality issues that we have as a region. So what are some of the ways through which we can strengthen our vital statistics? One, we need to invest in infrastructure and resources. And when we're talking about investment in infrastructure and resources, we are referring to resources such as human resource, financial resource, but also we are referring to structures, the infrastructure such as the road network, but also buildings that can help to accommodate registration. And mainly when we're referring again to infrastructure, we want to look at a system through which vital registration can be reported. We want to understand whether we can invest and have a reporting system and an infrastructure or a structure that monitors vital registration in that regard. But also we need to do community awareness and community engagements on the importance of vital registrations. These are skills we have already studied the same way we do community awareness for reproductive health. We may have cross-cutting issues here as well, where you have to do radio talk shows, you have to do community dialogues, you need to do adverts and so forth. Simplifying registration procedures. We very well know that we have hectic registration procedures where if someone lines up today, they may come back tomorrow. Or when someone lines up in the morning to be registered, they may come back in the evening. And most times, for us men, we claim socially that we have responsibilities of looking for money, and therefore, a man may not be able to line up as much as a woman would line up for that particular purpose. So it is important that we simplify and shorten the registration procedures so that we have more of our population registered. Fourth, we need to utilize technology and innovation, because technology then innovates and helps us shorten some of the processes. And therefore, it will be very vital for those of us who understand IT so much to develop systems for us to do vital registrations and then be able to store our data or our information on of our population. So, what is completeness of vital registration data? The completeness of vital registration data, specifically birth and death registration, is crucial for understanding population dynamics, informing public health policies, and ensuring individual rights. So, the completeness in this regard, we mean that when from that standard, from your standard registration sheet, either a death certificate, I mean either a death registration card or a birth registration card, you should be able to complete all the credentials that are in that particular card. And we're saying that if you're able to complete all the indicators in that particular template, then it is what we are referring to as completeness of registration data. And therefore, we shall be able to have a deeper understanding of our population dynamics. So, if you are registering, especially, I would use a health facility uh, example all the time, because I think most of us have an idea of how the health facility setup is. And if you're using, let us say, the nutrition register to register probably your nutrition cases, your malnutrition cases, if you registered the name of the person, and then you skip the place of or the residence where this person comes from, and then you put the age, you skip the contact, then you skip the name of the mother, and then you skip probably some of the vital information about this person, the MWAC. Probably you do the MWAC, and then you do the MWAC. By MWAC, I mean mid arm circumference. So if you did those measurements and you do not have the person's height, you don't have their weight, you don't have their Z score probably like that, then that missing information is going to make it very hard for us to understand the population dynamics. And when we are referring to population dynamics, you want to attribute certain events to a certain outcome. For example, you would want to attribute if you had more people in Torit who have malnutrition coming to your health facility, then you will want to understand the population dynamics in Torit. That makes them be a little more malnourished than the other people. And probably you will realize that Torit is a more urban area, and therefore people are not growing nutritious food, and they are always feeding on junk food, meaning they are feeding on food that is roughly prepared or sold along the streets, just as an example, to associate population dynamics. So, what is the importance of completing data? I think I have run through some, but here we are saying that complete data allows for accurate estimation of population size, growth rates, age structure, and other demographic indicators. Then it is reliable data on births and deaths. It helps monitor disease outbreaks, track maternal and child health indicators, but also birth registration is essential for legal identity, access to education, healthcare, and social protection programs, as we mentioned earlier. So, what are some of the challenges to completeness? Similarly to challenges of vital registration, we have limited access to registration services, probably as a result of geographical remoteness, lack of awareness, but also logistical hurdles such as transport can prevent timely registration. But we also have weak civil registration systems where we have inadequate infrastructure, insufficient resources, and poor record keeping practices. Then we have cultural and social factors, stigma surrounding certain causes of death, or mistrust in authorities can deter registration. And therefore, sometimes we have causes of death that happen in the village settings, and because probably someone has a different thought of how someone is, probably how this person died, or it is not culturally accepted for them, they may not do the reporting of this death. But also we understand religiously that for the Muslim faith, burial most times occurs immediately after death. And sometimes, because these individuals are buried as fast as they die, you may not be able to establish the cause of death, but as well, it may be very hard for someone to be able to register such occurrences. But also, culturally, we know in some societies that they claim if a child is born, then there would be no need to register as fast as possible because they associate it to bad luck. So those are some of the challenges that affect completeness of data. We have what are some of the methods for estimating completeness? One is what we call the dual record system, where we match records from vital registration with another independent source, like population surveys or household registries. So dual just comes from dual means two. So here we are matching two or more records. You have your vital statistics record, but also you have another population data source, such as a survey or household registry, to understand what the differences are. So then you can estimate the level of completeness. But also we have indirect demographic methods using mathematical models based on population dynamics and vital events ratios to estimate completeness. So indirect demographic methods, these are mathematical models. Then we have the capture-recapture method, where conducting surveys to identify unregistered events and estimate the proportion missed by the registration system. So here you capture people, then you again go back and recapture those that probably missed, and so you that recapture method can help you identify where possibly there were gaps. So how can we improve completeness? I think we have already discussed this as well, and we're saying that strengthening civil registration, facilitating access to registration services, community engagements, working with community leaders, that is what we mean, and organizations to promote awareness. And when we're discussing facilitating access to registration services, we are meaning expanding outreach programs, offering mobile registration units, and simplifying registration procedures. And in simplification of registration procedures, it also involves using innovative measures such as mobile phones or online registrations that make it a little easier for individuals to access these services. And one most important aspect that is happening today is if you look at the banking sector, you realize that if governments actually adopted the banking sector, the system of the banking sector, it will be very easy for us to achieve the demographic aspects that we demographers advocate for. And why would I say we need to take an example of the banking system? Today, you're able to realize there's mobile banking, you can bank from your home, there's SMS. So it has been made a little easier for individuals to access financial services, and you can be able to see how banks are thriving in their business just because they are using technology to simplify every aspect for their clients. So before we look at age sex accuracy, uh, I want us to look at okay, we can look at it, but it's a calculation, and for all these calculations that we have, I am preparing a particular session probably on Monday, or yes, probably on Monday, where we are going to capture all the calculations, starting with the ones we have for age heaping, the Whipple's index and Myers blended index. Then I also want us to capture the aspect of age sex accuracy index. However, we can just go through it, but on Monday we shall be able to understand deeply what specifically we want to look at in terms of the calculations we have had in this demographic survey. So when you're referring to age sex accuracy, or what we call the ASI index, we are saying that this helps to assess the quality and consistency of reported age and sex data in population censuses or surveys. It was developed by the UN, and it provides a single numeric score indicating the overall level of accuracy in the reported age and sex distribution. But the age sex accuracy index is a method of evaluating and the quality and reliability of population statistics classified by age and sex. It is based on the calculation of age and sex ratio for 5-year age groups up to the age of 70. So it is more of a mathematical concept, and we shall be able to look at that as I have said, and therefore I wouldn't want to spend more time on it there. So I want us to understand to conclude with what we call the Chandrasekaran and Deming formula. So it is a formula to estimate the completeness of birth registration in a population based on the assumption that age distribution of birth is similar in different regions. So when you're looking at this, what we normally refer to as C and D formula, the formula is that C is equals to 100 times D over P, where you divide it by D over P. And when we are referring to C, it means we are looking at the completeness of death registration. And so you say that completeness of death information will equals to 100 multiplied by the number of deaths in that particular population, divided by the total number of people in that particular area, and then you divide it by the corresponding numbers in the reference area with completed registration. So here you're looking at census data vis-a-vis your population data. In this C&D formula, you will get information, for example, in your vital statistics. So the capital D and the capital B and the capital P is what you have in your vital statistics. And if I'm to create, if I'm just to create another slide here so that we're able to understand what I'm meaning. So what will happen is that your completeness of death data of death would be 100. You multiply it by, if in your vital statistics you had your population, your number of deaths as 300 out of 100,000 of your population in this formula. So we are substituting capital D as 300 and capital P as 100,000. That would be how it would look like. So then you divide this figure, you divide this, you put this over, you put, sorry, my cursor is disturbing me. So you divide this, let me just put here brackets. You divide this by your D and P. So D and P are your reference information. And when we're talking about your reference information, we are looking at the other source that you're comparing your vital statistics with. So it could probably be your census data for that particular area that you were looking at. And say your census probably saying that there are 450 deaths, divided by, and your census saying the population there is actually 110,000 people. So this figure would be able to give you the completeness of death information. So this formula can be applied to compare the death registration of different subgroups within a country, such as urban and rural areas or different provinces. So you will just need to substitute that provincial information in order to get the data or the completeness of death registration in that particular province. The formula requires reliable data on the total number of deaths and population in both the study and the reference areas, and the assumption that the age-specific death rates are similar in both areas. So the assumption here is that the age-specific death rates are similar. So the formula may not be valid if there are significant differences in mortality patterns or data quality between the study and reference areas, or if large migrations or other demographic changes affect the population size or structure. And definitely, we very well understand that mortality patterns are not they are not uniform, and that is why we have criticism of the Chandran-Karen and Deming formula as well. So that is actually the concluding slide, and unless we have any other questions on that or on vital statistics, I would like to conclude there. Do we have any questions? It was a wrap. Do we have any questions? I think no questions. John, do you have any question? You're always the one who was.
For today, there's no question. Only that